and I know I'm getting in the weeds. That's the thing. And that's what I'm trying to keep myself from doing too much in any conversation about video games, is like I'm getting too deep. Everybody's talking about Fallout. It's Fallout fever out there, baby. Fallout fever has taken the nation by storm, and I, for one, am kinda about it. I have not seen the Fallout TV show yet. I fully intend to. Like, all of the Fallout games have gotten spikes in players since that show came out, because there's no, like, unified new Fallout product. So you've got people playing Fallout 4, you've got people playing Fallout 3, you've got people playing Fallout New Vegas, you've got people playing Fallout 1 and 2. There are probably people in some sort of Icarus-like defiance of the gods playing Fallout Tactics on Steam as we speak, right now. I love Fallout. I love Fallout for several reasons. Here's the main reason I love Fallout. I love Fallout because as a person in his, adulthood, we'll just call it adulthood. Early adulthood feels wrong, but I'm also not late adulthood, because that's what? Is that just a senior citizen? I don't know. I'm almost 30. As a person of that age, the narrative of people living in the ruins that were left to them by previous generations that may or may not have had fancy ideas of what we would now call a retro futurist future would look like that we didn't get. Something about people having to exist in that world is appealing to me. Also, I like the music. I'm a music dork, and I love the idea of a Bethesda game that you can run around a big open world in and interact with on an intimate degree, and also you can listen to music from the 40s. I like that. I have played all of the Fallouts. I have finished all of the Fallouts except for Tactics and 2. I say all of that because the Fallout people are so varied, and there are also enough of them, apparently, that I feel like any sort of discussion about Fallout kind of has to include what is your personal history with the series. So real quick, 3 was my first one. I loved it. At the time, I still kind of like it, even though if I want to play a game that old that is a Fallout game, I'm probably going to play New Vegas. It is far more satisfying. To Bethesda's credit, Obsidian did write the better game. They created the more narratively fulfilling game, but also they didn't have to build the fucking technology. It's really easy to shit on Bethesda all the time, and I have done it, and I will do it. I bought that stupid fucking Starfield watch, so I'm allowed. I'm allowed to. They owe me this. They owe me not feeling guilty about speaking my truth, which is that they've kind of been making the same game for like 20 years. They've kind of been making the same thing since Oblivion, arguably since the beginning. But I think Elder Scrolls 1 into 2 into 3, Arena to Daggerfall to Morrowind is such an evolution. It is such a constantly evolving world and series of concepts that I feel that it is disingenuous to give them anything but the highest credit for crafting that, right? And I mean, honestly, some of the licensed games that they were doing before they got into a position of only working on their own IP are pretty interesting too. They're not the best in the world. I played one of those Star Trek games that they published on PS2, I think. And that's weird. That's a weird sentence, is that I played the Bethesda published Star Trek, like, kind of tactical. It's not really a flight sim, but it's not really like a shoot 'em up, and it's not really a strategy game. It's just a ship game. You got ships, and you point them at places, and you say, set phasers to hyper kill, and then you shoot the phasers. I don't know. I like Fallout a lot. I think that what Bethesda did with Fallout 3 was an evolution of the series. I think a lot of people shit on them for it, which is like the craziest thing in the world to me. Because like Fallout is as popular as it is because of Bethesda. Like Fallout was dead, and then Bethesda bought it and made their own Fallout 3 that was different from what was being planned for Fallout 3. And, that's a famous story, is that the project Van Buren was being worked on, I believe, at In Exile. And then that game never got to come out partially because Bethesda then somehow came into possession of Fallout while someone else was working on Fallout. I don't know how that happened. I feel like there's probably an element or two to that story and timeline that's not completely accurate here from my memory, but because that seems crazy to me. But whatever the case, I don't think Van Buren was going to set the world on fire if it had been a 3D CRPG that had come out in 2008. CRPGs were dead in 2008. They were kind of dead for a long time. Like, they were kind of dead sort of post Baldur's Gate 2. Like, Baldur's Gate 2 is sort of the swan song of the CRPG. And yeah, there were more that kept being made the whole time. But like, no one cared about CRPGs the way they cared about Baldur's Gate after Baldur's Gate. And that will probably be true to some extent in a post Baldur's Gate 3 world. But I also think that we will see more CRPGs that are like Warhammer Rogue Trader, which I have started playing, and less like Baldur's Gate 3, because nobody's going to have the money or the resources to make a Baldur's Gate 3. I wish they did. In an ideal world, they would. What Bethesda did with Fallout is that they took the aesthetics and the lore, the world, they took all of the story and pasted it onto this engine that they've been working on through the Elder Scrolls, their technology, and they made it this big open world exploration first sort of game. They made it an immersive sim / RPG like they have been making since fucking Arena came out. I like Fallout more than the Elder Scrolls, I think, because I like the Americana trappings a little bit more than the, honestly, batshit insane lore of the Elder Scrolls, which I want to make some sort of video on at some point, because like, there's shit in those games that you would not believe unless you're already kind of tuned to it. And like, some of it is straight up just, if you read the books in Skyrim, which I wasn't really reading the 2-3 page books that you randomly pick up in Skyrim. But if you read some of them, they get crazy, and then there's more of them, and then maybe that pushes you down the rabbit hole of playing Morrowind, and then you're like, what the fuck is happening anymore? Because it gets crazy. Like, in the first 15 minutes of playing Morrowind, someone will use the proper noun ghost fence, and you'll be like, what the fuck is that? And they won't explain it to you. You'll figure it out later, but anyway. Bethesda makes games like that. Nobody else makes games like that. Nobody else is making immersive sim RPGs. The closest thing we have gotten in recent memory is it's just Cyberpunk, I think. I can't think of anything else. There was like Underworld Ascendant, which I think, God help him, Warren Spector, I think, was involved in that, and that game sucks. That game barely works. There is a reason I got that game for like $1, you know? It blows. And I'm trying to think, I think of anything else I could name, it's mostly just a pure immersive sim. Like that System Shock remake, which is really good, is just an immersive sim. And like, yeah, it has RPG elements, but like, if we're talking about a marriage of an immersive sim, like a Deus Ex style game with a role-playing game, nobody's doing that but Bethesda. Nobody. And it's my favorite kind of game because I like getting lost in world, and I like the worlds that they have crafted. Luckily for me, I like the Elder Scrolls world, and I like the Fallout world. Bethesda has not been very creative with their worlds beyond the background. And I think that's because they really do come at things from a video game first perspective. And I think Fallout 4 is a really good example of what I'm talking about. Fallout 4 attempts to build upon the framework that Bethesda had already established for years in these games, and at that point, most recently with Skyrim, which was 4 years before Fallout 4, and also Skyrim at that point was a huge success. It was a crazy big success. What Fallout 4 includes that was not in previous Bethesda games is base building and more use for what I will just call junk. Junk items, little junk items, which is part of what has made Bethesda games so engrossing to me, is that their worlds are detailed down to a level that you can pick up like individual objects and move them around, and their positions are saved and all of this stuff. The things that make the game start crapping its pants after you play it long enough and your saves get corrupted and all that stuff. Like no one's figured out that technology super well yet, but also, again, nobody else is doing it. Fallout 4 gives you a reason to collect that stuff because it can be sort of broken down into individual components like screws and adhesives and metals, plastics, you know, all of the little video gamey crafting material currencies that they come up with. And you can save those to build physical objects of more use for your settlements or decorations for your settlements. And then part of the theme of Fallout 4 is actually rebuilding the wasteland, which is great because one of the big problems with Fallout 3 and New Vegas is that at that point it's been 200 years since this nuclear war, and there are still people living in places that have skeletons in them from the war. Like the Drumlin Diner in Fallout 4. You go to the Drumlin Diner and it's like, this is a store. This is where two people live. An older woman and her junky son that are being attacked by raiders that you can run into. Like, you can do that little quest, and if you walk in, there's a skeleton in there. There's like a burnt out skeleton, with the implication being it looks like the skeletons from any other place in these Bethesda games where they do their fun little environmental storytelling, but people are supposed to have been living there for some amount of time. They didn't roll up in there like 5 minutes ago, but even if they had, why is that skeleton in this open air building for 200 years? And I know I'm getting in the weeds. That's the thing. And that's what I'm trying to keep myself from doing too much in any conversation about video games, is like I'm getting too deep. Like at some point it doesn't fucking matter why there's a skeleton there from like a factual point of view. But it does pull me out of it. And I get frustrated that it pulls me out of it because the game it's immersive. There's a word that gets thrown around a lot, especially when you talk about modding Bethesda games, which is its whole own fucking community of people with like drama and history, people who are popular there, you don't know who they are if you're not in that scene. Like, it has its own everything. One of the big things that people kind of strive for sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes what people strive for with mods is what they call immersion. And the idea being that you sort of suspend your disbelief betterer, and then you feel like you're in the fictional world, which is something, again, that Bethesda games can offer that other games pull off too. I've played other games in first person where I just feel like, whoa, it feels like I'm there for at least like a half a second until I remember that I'm in this horrible human body and not the body of some Greek god able to run for 45 minutes without stopping to take a breath. Like, that's not, it's nice. But the problem with Fallout 4 is while they were focusing on systems like that are honestly kind of genius, because it gives a gameplay reason for all the little decorative crap that they have put in their games to make them more believable. It gives a gameplay reason for them to exist. It gives you a reason to collect them. It gives them a use, which is great. You want that. I want that. Problem is that I think they were so focused on the gameplay elements and getting you to play these games for hundreds of hours that like a lot of the kind of basic shit suffered. And Fallout 4 is where you start seeing the cracks that are really evident in Starfield, the characters, and in general the writing. Not just the characters, but the writing in general, the story of Fallout 4. There's really no better way to explain how the story of Fallout 4 is bad other than it puts you in a position where your infant child is kidnapped. And most people agree that they don't care. I don't think I've met anyone personally who was at like any point, oh no, I was like invested in the story of Fallout 4. And I have talked to a lot of people about Fallout 4, buddy. I've talked to more people about Fallout 4 than you would probably guess. It is a number that I don't know the exact number on. I guess I could stop here and do a count, but I'm not gonna. Point is, it's a high number, right? It's not just, a couple of my buddies didn't like Fallout 4 either. Ugh. It's not the boys. But like, I feel like it's kind of a meme at some point that like Fallout 4's story is about the baby, and like, who cares? Who cares about the baby? What I want out of Fallout 4 is I want to go find a bunch of super mutants who have taken over a building, and I want to shoot all of them until a thing pops up on my map and it says clear. I want to find a magazine that gives me a power. I want to find a bobblehead that gives me more power. I want a better gun or a sick knife with like not an enchantment on it, but kind of an enchantment, guys. It's kind of an enchantment. I had a gun, my first playthrough through Fallout 4, my favorite gun was a 10mm pistol that I found off of a legendary drop. I think it was a Rad Roach, which is very funny. And it dropped a 10mm handgun that didn't need to be reloaded. So like just one magazine, 400 bullets, And I called it the bottomless breadsticks because the fun never ends at Olive Garden. And I really don't have a lot of other good things to say about Fallout 4 other than I have played it for hundreds of hours since 2015 and I kind of hate it. It's like I don't think there's anything else I've spent so much time with that I kind of hate, and I hate that I hate it. I hate that I hate it because I didn't always hate it. I didn't. At one point I liked it. That's how you get to 200 hours. But I'm that fool on Steam who has like 240 hours recorded and then clicks the don't recommend button on the review thing. It's like, nope, don't. I don't recommend it to new people. It's the most accessible Fallout, which shouldn't be the case, but is. But that's really the only case I have for it to try and get people like into Fallout. is like that's the easiest one that they can go buy and just play. Because at some point you don't want to explain like, oh, well, I mean, Fallout 3 is pretty good, but you probably want to play it on your computer and like it'll be fucking broken if you try to play it. So you have to install this and this and this. And here's this guide. Here's this guy's GitHub that will tell you the 37 things you have to do before you can play this game and it works well. And New Vegas is the same fucking way. Like New Vegas is so busted on a modern computer that like there's a modding guide called Viva New Vegas that is basically like the bedrock for any experience playing New Vegas these days. It seems like not just modding it, but it's just sort of like even if you don't really want to quote unquote mod the game, you kind of need to do steps X, Y, and Z to even get it to work correctly, which is just crazy to me. Like I understand it from a technical perspective, hardware changes and it probably wasn't that great at launch. I don't really know. I wasn't there necessarily, not on PC, but also like just the idea that for some new person, maybe who isn't even into video games, to play this like really good game, like really fucking good, like New Vegas is a fucking good game. It's a game that I think should be on a list of if at some point someone creates a list of quote unquote critical texts for the video game space, which I could talk all day about that and maybe someday I will. I think Fallout New Vegas should be on that list. It's a game that you should play, and context adds to it, knowing about the development history of Fallout and knowing what Fallout 1 and 2 were and knowing what Fallout 3 was later and knowing about how, you know, elements of Van Buren made it into New Vegas and all that. That makes it a more interesting experience, but on face by itself, it's cool. I think it's the best use of the Fallout setting so far. And I think, you know, a lot of people sit around, they're like, oh, New Vegas is so good. New Vegas is so good. And I could do that, and I won't. It is a good game. The end. Fallout 4 is a good game, but it also just kind of sucks because it's dull, man. It's dull. It feels like where I really wanted innovation was I wanted more reasoning to explore the world, and I wanted the combat in that world to feel more satisfying. Now, the combat in Fallout 4 does feel more satisfying than the combat in Fallout 3 or Fallout New Vegas. That's true. That's not the highest bar, though, and they didn't clear it like very much. They didn't have a lot of wiggle room on that clearance they got, you know? Like, it is better, but I wouldn't say that like Fallout 4 is a good gunplay game. If you're a shooter person, Fallout 4 might be insufferable. I've run into that with some people that I've talked to who are primarily like first-person shooter people. Fallout 4 feels like on some levels, it feels like a baby's toy. And like, I don't think that the combat in Fallout needs to be, oh, it should just be like Call of Duty or whatever, which inevitably someone will say something like that because of the last little bit of me talking, but I don't think that. I think it could be better, though. I really think it could be better without trying very hard. And what I hate is that Starfield doesn't feel like an improvement at all on that combat. The gunplay in Starfield feels no different than the gunplay in Fallout 4. I think the guns look cooler and there's more variety, which is nice. But as far as the moment-to-moment playing of the video game goes, it's not better. It's not. And it's like, I know some people from the Central Bethesda studio worked on Fallout 76, but I understand that that was also primarily like a ZeniMax Online thing. So like Starfield as a 2023 release is 8 years after Fallout 4. And I can't help but feel that like maybe the focus is better spent elsewhere. And I think Starfield unfortunately makes things that are easy to point and be like, Bethesda are bad or lazy devs. I think it makes it easier to make those arguments. The big one being procedural generation. The fact that they relied on procedural generation and the scope of that game and what they wanted it to be zoomed out is so not fun when you are zoomed in and actually playing it. In Fallout 4, you can see how they got there. There's a smaller version of it in Fallout 4, which is they give you all of these like settlement locations, and some of them are just so half-baked. Some of them have like fun little mini stories, like the Good Tidings co-op is fun because there's the stoner Mr. Handy there. That's neat. It doesn't really have a story though. I think it's just like a terminal and then that robot existing. And there are a lot of places in Fallout that kind of just feel like, oh, this is a terminal doing environmental storytelling. And what's frustrating about that is like Bethesda's good at environmental storytelling. Fallout 3 has, and it, you know, I guess it's also guilty of sometimes you go to a location, it's just a terminal and like a robot, or a terminal and a skeleton. And Fallout 76 is quite literally this is a terminal and a skeleton. But there's a problem there in that there are people at that studio who are good at environmental storytelling. They're good at positioning people and items in such a way that you get a view of what they were doing when they died, which is good. I think that the game shouldn't be set 200 years after the bombs fell. I don't know why they did that other than to distance themselves even more than they already did geolocationally from the original 2 games. I feel like they wanted to make it theirs. Their Fallout 3 is set in DC and their headquarters was in DC and like that. They wanted to make it theirs. There's nothing wrong with that. The big time jump was dumb. The big time jump was dumb because it makes everything in that universe feel backwards. Fallout 4 having an underground organization of super scientists who can build fucking replicants that can fool anyone, existing alongside we don't know how to build anything. People on the ground who are like, my great granddaddy put up 4 walls of shit metal and my whole family's been living in it for generations now, and we will continue to without making any improvements to it whatsoever. That's crazy. That's crazy and also bad writing. I'm sorry. It's so crazy that it really does feel like I think the scope of the game is too much for their writers. And I think their writers are trying to play it generic so you can sort of play whatever character you want, because that's how they get you to come back and keep playing and buying add-ons and telling your friends that you should try this game out and all of that, and making fandoms and all these things that get people invested in the brand. And then, you put out a product like a TV show and oh my God, people are going to start buying mugs and hoodies and Etsy shit even, like at such a pace that, they're not, Bethesda's probably not making money off of Etsy sales. Support your local artists. But they're seeing return on this. I guess what gets me about Fallout 4 and the Fallout franchise in general is that I feel there is such creative potential for people to play within it. I think there are really interesting stories you can tell, and I think that a lot of people very naturally have interesting ideas about those stories, and you can see that from the modding scene for those games. There are several mods that are like, well, I made a Fallout about my town or some city near me or someplace I call it, New California, Alton, Illinois. There's one for Fallout 3. There's not a ton of mods for Fallout 3. Beyond Boulder Dome. And they're not the best pieces. They're probably worth playing if you're really invested in those games at least once. But it's not like required reading, I think. If you catch my drift, they're fine. Sometimes they're quite bad even, but they're interesting. They're always interesting because it's always just some dude made it, like a teenager made this. That's neat. And I think that's what's good about the Fallout brand is that it is inspiring enough to people that they're able to very easily kind of tell their own stories within that universe. It touches people. Something about it really speaks to them. It really resonates. But dude, in a lot of cases, I feel like the people who are actually writing the games aren't among those people. Sometimes it feels like one of the great things about Fallout is it's a mixture of a dark reality with sometimes surrealist humor. And I think Bethesda tells jokes in Fallout the way that an awkward middle schooler does, where they kind of have an idea about what makes people enjoy that. They comprehend it and they think they're doing it, but they're really not. The tiny red menace crab in Far Harbor, or any of their supposed to be funny dialogue options that they put on the X button in Fallout 4. And I'm not gonna sit here and say that the writing suffers because you made a voiced protagonist. If it was a silent protagonist, it would be better. It wasn't in Fallout 3 either. The writing in Fallout 3 is not great. I don't know that I would even call it better than Fallout 4. I think there's an argument to be made either way there, and I honestly don't have a dog in that fight. But what I think I want out of Bethesda is I want them to make something smaller. I want them to make something smaller. I want them to focus less on how much virtual space they have designed or you can access in their game, because I feel like saying they have designed is a little generous if we're talking about Starfield's procedural generation. But I don't want to explore different deserts that all kind of look the same forever. The reason I go back to Skyrim, the reason I go back to Fallout 4 even, is because the landscape tends to be interesting enough that I sort of naturally come across things. I've been playing Skyrim again for the first time in a couple of years with some mods. Shout out the Kazal mod list. Probably pronounced that wrong. Don't care. Fake language. It's great. It still feels like Skyrim, but it's improved. which is why I like that mod list, because I like base Skyrim. But I found a quest, like a vanilla quest that you can go look up on the wiki or whatever. It's not from a mod, that I'd never encountered before. And I've been playing Skyrim. I've played Skyrim multiple times since 2011, right? Almost 12 years I've been playing Skyrim. And I still found vanilla content I've not encountered before. That's amazing. That's what I want. I want them to go back to a manageable world space. I think they were burnt out when it came to Fallout 4. And I think they took This Is a Wasteland as an excuse sometimes to maybe just kind of get a location finished. And that's maybe why you end up with the story of a location being a terminal and a skeleton, or a terminal and a robot. I don't know. There might be something to that. And then Starfield, they were just like, can we make the computer do it? Can the computer do it instead? Which doesn't inspire confidence for any Elder Scrolls 6 or Fallout 5. But I mean, like, someone else is going to have to make Fallout before Bethesda makes Fallout 5. Because we're not going to get Elder Scrolls 6 for several years. And even if they went directly onto Fallout 5 from that, which is not a guarantee, that would probably be an additional, at least 5-6 years minimum, I think, past the release of whenever the hell that 6th Elder Scrolls game comes out. And I think, honestly, I feel like they kind of missed a golden opportunity not to get somebody to make something before this show came out. And I think they're kicking themselves over it right now, to some extent, anyway. I don't know if that will be Obsidian, which I guess would be like, oh, hallelujah, the dream comes true. Oh, the childhood dream comes true. It's Fallout New Vegas 2. I don't care if it's them or somebody else, but I feel like somebody or a team at Bethesda even should be working on something smaller scale. And I think that they should have projects like that going while they're working on this bigger thing too. Because if they're going to maintain the scale that they're working on and keep making it bigger and betterer and more stuff to do, it is not sustainable. It's not sustainable. You need a smaller, more curated experience. And I think Skyrim was a sweet spot for them. I think inadvertently, I don't think that maybe they've realized it now, I don't know, but I think Skyrim ended up kind of being a great sweet spot between simplifying the game enough that it is fun to play moment to moment, but also deep enough that people would want to come back to it. People would want to play it again. People would want to go in a different direction than they did before. They want to find that vanilla content, and there still is vanilla content for them to discover years later, or playthroughs later, whatever. People play games differently, whatever. Starfield doesn't have that. It has a lot of potential for that. The ending of that game sets up so much potential for that, and then they don't capitalize on it like at all, except for one thing that's like, oh, a PC Gamer wrote a funny article about this, and honestly, that's about the extent of me giving a shit about the one thing they bothered to do. I think that sucks. It's not lazy development. I think it's just development focused in the wrong places. That's what I think. I think it's development focused in the wrong places. I think it's the sort of development that should be recentered on narrative. It should be recentered on quest design. It should be recentered on character dialogue, because those are the things that keep me in that world. You have to get me invested in that world, even if your gameplay systems are good. You've still got to get me invested in the world for me to keep engaging with them and not feel like I've been tricked. Like at some point, I almost feel like Todd Howard / Bethesda Hardy Har is a snake oil salesman that's riding out of town with my $300, and they sold me this dinky fucking smartwatch, and I feel like a rube. And to some extent, I am a rube. But at the same time, they shouldn't be doing that to me. Don't do that to me. I am vulnerable and gullible and a fool. Stop taking advantage of me. I want to like you, damn it, but you're making it harder year after year. You're making it more difficult. I think that a good way to make a game that is more fulfilling than Starfield and more fulfilling than Fallout 4 is to make a smaller game, both from a development budget standpoint and also a quote-unquote physical play space. Make a smaller map. I don't care how many Skyrims can fit inside the map. All I care about is if the stuff on the map that I can do is fun or not. And if you spend a lot of time with Fallout 4, that stuff starts being not fun. And if you spend much time at all with Starfield, that stuff is not fun. And that sucks. That sucks. And I think there's a way around it. That's my theory. That's my game theory. Thanks for watching. I think that there's something to it. But, everything, as always, grain of salt. I'm not a developer. I don't run a studio. I'm just some dork. Right? But there is a part of me that feels that if there's just sort of some kind of come to Jesus moment and realization that maybe the story does matter, maybe we should try again in that front. I feel like that's where it feels that things get lazy. It's not the game design aspect. It's not the game part. It's the story part. It's the glue, not the pieces. But I don't know. Anyway,